Funding for the production of Public Square provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, working to improve the lives of vulnerable children.
They looked at my disability as a weakness, and they just took it and ran with it.
My 9-year-old daughter had a knife pulled on her at Pajarito Elementary and was threatened by the bully that he would kill her if she let anybody know that he had a knife.
So it's affected me my whole entire life, obviously. I've never dealt with it. I always thought I was alone. And I had no idea that other people went through the same thing I did.
It's what my mom says, when you're getting in trouble, she'll put the fear of God in you. And that's what bullies do. They put the fear into people. And from that fear, they take whatever they want.
The elementary and middle school, 46% attribute bullying and the experience of repeated bullying at school as a significant factor in why they feel suicidal.
If we throw him out of school and he's incarcerated, he's not going to learn anti-bullying techniques incarcerated. And he's going to be a worse bully when he comes out.
Welcome to Public Square, where civic dialogue takes center stage.
We can't continue to tell kids that it's kids being kids, it's child's play, it's teasing, learn to get along with people. It just does not work.
Today we explore bullying. The statistics are alarmingly high, and the impact oftentimes devastating. It's certainly not a new problem, but in recent years, the rate and intensity of bullying have increased. We'll hear from people who experienced bullying as kids, and we'll meet parents whose children have been victimized by bullies. We'll learn about anti-bullying efforts in schools and the community. After that, we'll talk about possible solutions. We'll hear from State Representative Rick Miera, Christine Muir with the State Public Education Department, and Tana Burgos, Director of Student Services with Rio Rancho Public Schools. Before we get started, here's a little bit more about our topic.
I came here today because enough is enough. My daughter got caught up in the bullying cycle as a victim and turned into a bully.
It's a problem that has been with us for decades, perhaps centuries, but all signs indicate that bullying is getting worse. Nationwide, 90% of students in 4th through 8th grades report being victims of bullying. And each day, 160,000 children miss school due to fears of being bullied, accounting for 15% of all school absenteeism.
Bullying caused my daughter to have nightmares. She turned into somebody we didn't know, and we've had to work very, very hard to turn her back into that nice little girl that she used to be.
Students are targeted just because they're different, fatter, skinnier, smaller, or perceived as weak. Those who are lesbian, gay, or bisexual, or those who are suspected of being among that group, are at even greater risk. And kids with disabilities are also 2 to 3 times more likely to be bullied.
I've had my hand broken. It's like I've been choked out. Like, how could someone be so cruel?
Albuquerque Public Schools has an average of 800 suicide referrals a year. Among the elementary and middle school students in that group, 46% say bullying is a factor behind their despair. Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death among New Mexico youth ages 10 to 14, and the 2nd leading cause among people ages 15 to 24.
Bullying causes a lot of depression. It causes people to really doubt themselves, and it really causes people to not be all they can be.
Bullying has long-lasting impacts on our whole society. Victims often experience anxiety, depression, and loneliness. They may have trouble sleeping. They lose interest in things. Their schoolwork might suffer. Kids who bully others often engage in violent and other risky behaviors. They are more likely to abuse alcohol and drugs, drop out of school, engage in sexual activity earlier, and have criminal records. They may become abusers as adults.
If we don't solve this problem, then we'll have a generation that learned that if I'm bigger than you, or if I'm stronger than you, I have the right to push you around. It is my divine ability to say that you are less than me, so I can pretty much tell you what to do, I can make you do what I want, and that's not peaceful society.
The issue is getting renewed attention nationally with the new documentary Bully. States are passing more laws to stem the tide. In New Mexico, all schools must put anti-bullying programs in place by this fall. But parents, students, and advocates say it's important to have their voices as part of any solution to this issue.
One person can't handle this alone. You have to stand up. That's the thing, is people that are being bullied in schools, they don't have anyone standing up for them. And the thing is, you have to tell the kids, you can stand up. You can fight this fight.
We just need to sit down, have our voices heard, and all work on this and come to a conclusion, because lives and safety of our kids is what we're working for.
Thank you all for joining us today on Public Square. I'm so excited that you can be here. We're talking about bullying. I want to start off talking to some people who've experienced this personally. RJ, you are well known to all of us as an actor here on Breaking Bad, but you went through a lot of bullying in high school. Can you talk about that?
I actually wasn't even in high school.
Really? It was earlier?
I was 6th grade.
Oh my gosh.
I had my hand broken because I was actually playing basketball. I was up by 2 points, and kid didn't like it, so he smashed my hand. I dealt with name calling. It's like I was always having one lung issue after a heart issue after all this, so it was like I always had some machine strapped to my body.
And why did they target you?
Why does anyone else get picked on? It's because they're weaker, they're smaller, and there's more than one person. Like that's like really the main reason why I was probably picked on.
Is it also because you had a disability? I know that kids are more subject to bullying.
Well, it gets back to the weaker thing. They looked at my disability as a weakness, and they just took it and ran with it.
How did it impact you as you went through school?
I actually didn't look at it as bullying. It just looked at it as something else I had to deal with and get over and overcome. And that's what we really need to tell our kids is, once you stand up for yourself, no one will bother you. All you have to do is stand up one time.
Did you tell people when it happened, or did you think
I confronted people. I told my friends. My friends all told me to go to the principal.
Did you go?
Yeah. I had no problem. Kid got expelled. It was the 9th time he was expelled from a school.
Brian, can you talk a little bit about your experience, which was a while ago, right? But
yes.
It's still impacting you. Can you talk a little bit about what happened to you?
Sure. My bullying started when I was 9 years old. And so it's affected me my whole entire life, obviously. I've never dealt with it. I always thought I was alone. And I had no idea that other people went through the same thing I did. I dropped out of high school because I was tired of dealing with it. It's important for me to let people know that this isn't kids being kids. One thing that I speak very loudly about is the zero tolerance policy in schools. I was trained not to fight, not trained but taught. It was always taught in my house that you don't fight. No matter what, you do not fight. So I was very small as a child. When my bullying started, I was in 4th grade and I weighed 45 pounds. When I get bullied and beat up, is a better way to put it than being bullied. I was just beat up. And I would just stand there and take it, or be walking away as I was getting beat. And I would get taken to the principal's office, and I would get the same punishment as the person that beat me up. And it is absolutely unacceptable. It's still being done today. An example that I like to use, especially as a police officer, is if I responded to a domestic violence situation where a husband beat up his wife, and I took her to jail, and then she had to serve the same sentence as the person that beat her up, the community would be in an uproar. And that's the same thing that we have to do for these kids with the zero tolerance. We can't continue to tell kids that it's kids being kids, it's child's play, it's teasing, learn to get along with people. It just does not work. So in adulthood, I live a life that isn't who I am, because I have to withdraw myself and protect myself from what happened to me as a child, because I've never gotten over it.
Dee, you've had a child who was bullied, and then also you said she started becoming a bully.
Yes.
Can you talk about how you handled that?
My daughter was in 5th grade, and a couple of years ago the bullying started, and then she started acting out like a bully herself, and was probably called a bully, and in fact I called her a bully. And my husband and I did in a meeting with our principal, and we were told that there weren't any bullies in the school, and I said, but my own daughter is one. I'm saying she is. We just had to work very, very hard under our roof to put a positive spin on things, and in everything we talk to her about, we try to say, you don't understand what the other person is going through. You need to have some compassion and understand that people are different, and accept people for who and what they are, and respect them because they are other human beings. We are on her constantly because she was a sweet little girl, and just overnight she started doing things that we never dreamed our daughter would be doing and acting out, and we decided that the bullying cycle is going to stop at our house because she was a victim who became a bully, and that's what happens.
What were the indications you had first that she was being victimized and then she was doing it to other kids?
Nightmares, panic attacks, lashing out over nothing. Her anger just goes from 0 to 10 and nothing flat, and we just talk and talk and talk and talk about everything to try to make sure she's not holding anything in, because kids don't talk about this because they're afraid. And
they're afraid of you, or they're afraid
No,
of
they're afraid of the perception and everything that goes on around them, and for fear of retaliation also. It's just a daily battle.
My 9-year-old daughter had a knife pulled on her at Pajarito Elementary and was threatened by the bully that he would kill her if she let anybody know that he had a knife. She was smart enough to get out of class and make her way to the office to let the principal know that this child had a knife. She has also suffered from panic attacks, anxiety, nightmares, and started lashing out and being angry. Like Dee said, she went from 0 to 10, in no time. She's experienced bullying in other ways with school. Kids telling her her clothes wasn't good enough, pushing her, stepping on her. But the knife was the scariest situation.
What did you do?
Pulled her out of the school because the child that threatened her was allowed to come back to school 5 days later after spring break, and I didn't feel that that was okay.
How did it make you feel as a parent to know your child was going through that?
Sad. School should be a happy place. Your kids shouldn't feel threatened at school. That's the place they should want to be. And I knew something was happening when every morning she was sick. She didn't want to go. Teachers and the principal never believed me until my child actually threw up on the principal's shoe one morning, and she said, okay, we have a problem.
Torin, you started an anti-bullying club.
At our school we started a club called the Anti-Bullying Campaign, and basically what our club did, we did 3 major things. We spread awareness, we were able to get more reported cases, so like how Dee was saying her daughter didn't want to tell her, we're kind of breaking down that wall and kind of helping children understand that you can talk to adults, you can talk to a teacher or a principal, and it's going to be okay. And we also started to increase peer-to-peer intervention. So like say me and RJ, we are bullying you for some reason, and Dee is our friend, and she'll say, hey, that's not right, what are you doing, that's weird. That young people will think, okay, well our peers are saying that we're doing something wrong, we should probably stop. Because peer pressure is very, very powerful.
I've seen your program. It works. Because really what we need is just one voice. One voice to tell the bully that the bully respects.
Yes. And if, say, one person says something or one person speaks up, imagine if 5 people speak up, or 10 people, or an entire crowd. And if, say, a school of 100 kids, there's one bully, and 99 kids say, we don't approve of this, you need to stop. Now, I know that could be seen as bullying itself, but really, you're trying to say, hey, this is wrong, we can't be like this.
Brooke, there's something similar that APS has called the Ambassadors. It's part of the larger Safe Schools program.
The idea that you engage those who are influential in a school and have some ability to make change. You teach them skills on how to engage their peers to stop mistreatment before it escalates into something more. And then they practice those skills, and then you send them out, and they initiate and use the skills. There's a part of the program where you're engaging with adults, and so you're building relationships and building those protective factors. And we have the Safe School Ambassador program in 6 schools in Albuquerque Public Schools in the middle schools.
Could you give us a better idea of why bullies target certain people?
Studies show that the primary reason that anyone is targeted for bullying is that in some way they're different.
Dr. Pierce, can you talk a little bit about your work?
We provide same-day suicide assessments for the school district. They can call and say they have a child at the school with suicide ideation. And we do about 800 a year, which is a sad statement that many kids
How much is bullying component?
In the elementary and middle school, 46% attribute bullying and the experience of repeated bullying at school as a significant factor in why they feel suicidal. At the core of it is humiliation, is part of it, and there's nothing worse than being humiliated. As Brian very courageously was sharing, it's very devastating, and it's hard to talk about. You're even humiliated to tell others why you're being bullied or what they're saying, so you don't say it. And a lot of kids will, on impulse, go from a bullying situation where they're being bullied and literally do self-harm behavior or make attempts. I really want to bring the perspective of we can do a lot about the bullying, but one of the things we really need to look at is understanding why so much bullying and the level of bullying. And now we can even bully on social media and not even see the person's reaction when they're being humiliated. So it makes it that much easier. But why are children and teenagers so capable of being bullies?
Why? Yeah.
I see it as a social issue. Sometimes the fact that they've been bullied themselves, and the way to be protective, self-protective, is become the bully. They've been bullied at home, in their own home environments, or they've had some serious relational challenges in their own from their parents or their homes where they haven't developed. Literally, brain development hasn't occurred for them to feel empathy. There's a serious decline. Research is really showing, literally, a study in Michigan University shows that youth have a 40% less capability of empathy today than they did 30 years ago.
Robert, can you teach empathy?
So I don't know whether you can teach empathy, but I think there are lots of things you can do within the education system in a classroom to create relationships. The students who come to RFK were not being well served in the traditional school setting for whatever reason. So we have students that were bullied, right? And they dropped out because they weren't safe. Then we have students that were bullies who were thrown out because they were bullying, right? And so zero tolerance can't be argued. I mean, it can't be allowed. But at the same time, that student came to our school with some real misunderstandings about how we should be treating each other. So the school, we feel, has a responsibility to make sure that student who was a bully understands what that is and that it's not allowed and that we are in a relationship here. So that if you want to be at RFK, you're not going to treat each other that way. RFK students then form a family and they really begin to protect each other. I can remember a student 5 or 6 years ago, I believe he came from El Dorado, his name was William, and we have home teams that really do support each other. He didn't weigh 95 pounds as a 9th grader, and he was a talented artist. He drew angels. He had a book of angel drawings. So at first the students were a little odd with them, but they became relational. And then every other student who came into that classroom that wanted to say anything to them, all the other students would say, hey, we don't treat each other that way. And so that really is, when young people say that, that's not how we act here. That's not how we treat each other. They are going to listen to young people more than they're going to listen to anyone else. So in a big school, it's a little more difficult. Robert F. Kennedy Charter School is a small school, but we work hard at being relational. And when we go there, it's a safer place. But I do think that students come to school with different levels of understanding. And so some students, I think, were bullied at home, right? When I watch TV, I see the lawyers bully the witness and the police officers bully people. And so it's a society that sort of perpetuates it, and then this is called bullying because you didn't understand the nuances. They need to understand the nuance, and then they need to be held accountable if they can't control it. But those supports need to be built in.
Almarosa, can you talk about your role with the UNM LGBTQ
Sure. So the Don't Just Stand There, Stop Bullying Now task force, it's a statewide task force, was developed in 2010, and the LGBTQ Resource Center was asked to be a part of that. Something that we haven't brought up is that the statistics for bullying and suicide are at least 3 to 4 times higher than our general population, especially someone that's starting to question their own either gender expression
for
or
people
gender
who are gay or questioning
identity, or they start to question their sexual orientation, or they come out and they start to really live and embrace the identity and who they are. So for those factors, the statistics are much higher. And in fact, we saw, I think now a couple years ago, a long line of what we are calling and hearing about bully-cides. People either being bullied for being LGBTQ or being perceived as part of the LGBTQ community. So this is really where we see social accountability and the bystander, because it is powerful, because there's young people, if it's a young person setting and there's bullying happening, now with our social media and our cell phones, we have videos. They're getting posted right away. And in those videos, the one thing I really notice is it's not just the aggressive action, but it's how many people are standing around watching.
So let me throw this out to everyone, what is the responsibility of a bystander?
To stand up. It really is interesting to see how many people will actually watch someone get beaten. Do you
think they're scared? Do you think
yeah. Well, it's not wanting to get involved because everyone has so much going on in their own life already. That's the human nature, is to stay out of the way. When there's bullets flying, you duck. And that is what most people do, is in a situation like that, people don't want to get involved. When you do stand up, not just you will stand up, but everyone around you will. It's all about it's what my mom says, when you're getting in trouble, she'll put the fear of God in you. And that's what bullies do. They put the fear into people. And from that fear, they take whatever they want.
Annalisa, why does Bernalillo County have an anti-bullying ordinance?
It's most important to us that we have a safe place for kids to recreate and to be able to enjoy their time after school. And talking about the bullying incident, I think it's important that you know that 85% of folks are watching. And so within our training and within our programs, we like to ask that kids, most importantly, they feel safe before they do anything. And then they can redirect, they can respond, or they can comfort. And by saying that, we say that you can redirect a conversation as simply as saying, do you know where the water fountain is? You can respond by saying, please don't say that, because it's going to be, you could be taken off the basketball team, or if you continue to say those types of things, you're going to get in trouble. Or you can comfort. And I think that a thing that we're missing here is that those that act aggressively also need comfort too. Because what's happening is they could be a respondent of being bullied themselves. And so I understand that there are folks that act aggressively, but there's a deeper nature behind that. And we have to understand that everybody needs support in that bullying incident and that sees these things that happen. The other thing that's important for us is that we can define what bullying is. And bullying can be something as simple as gossiping.
And I think as human beings, we can all attribute to those types of behaviors, and we have to think about, am I being a bully? And you hold yourself accountable, and then you hold your friends accountable. Because I know if Alma or Brooke were to say, what you said in that meeting was uncalled for and you were acting aggressively, it's going to keep me feeling much more responsible to my actions because my own peers are calling me out on it.
Is bully a problematic word because people don't think they're bullies?
It is. We need to define bully because everybody's using the term bully for every situation that comes up, because not every bullying situation is an assault, but some of them are.
We really try to talk a lot about moving away from labeling, particularly our young people, because as we know, and Dee gave us a great example of that you can move between roles. So it's just a behavior. That acting out aggressively is the behavior, and we want to make sure that we're talking about that, and because that's what we want to change, and thinking about how do we change that behavior and that mode of operation.
Alma, could you talk about the flash mobs just for a minute that you did to raise awareness?
So it's really one of the educational activities that we've done since the beginning of the task force, and it's really happened in middle schools, high schools, and at the University of New Mexico. And they're really to engage not just the young people and the students, but to also engage their parents. So it's really building and trying to develop a new culture where we are caring for each other. So the flash mobs were an exciting and fun activity for us to really engage and start that dialogue around the aggressive behavior and someone being targeted, and to give the community the strength to stand up and stop bullying. The focus is really the bystander, because as Annalisa was saying, the percentage is so high of people that are witnessing that bullying that those are the people, that's our community that needs to step in. And the flash mobs are really a dance. They're to be fun. We've seen them nationally, internationally, on YouTube. We could have one right now.
Well, we could.
Right. But the point is that nobody knows they're happening. They're this fun thing. All of a sudden, everyone's coordinated. I'm not the best dancer, but I was out there doing my shuffle, and so it intrigues people, right? As we are in this kind of voyeur society. So you're watching something, but there's also that message with the flash mobs. Don't just stand there, stop bullying now.
David, what's the risk of having really tough, stringent laws, no tolerance policies?
It's a very complex thing to address because it lacks definition. Most of the laws that are passed at this point do not include research-based definitions. So it's the emotional part and the reactive part. Somebody gets hurt, so they have to put all assaults, all kinds of assaults in it. Laws per se don't do as much as an effective cultural change. Robert has changed the culture of his school, and I think he very well described what the culture is. He's changed the expectations. It didn't take a law in order to accomplish that. New Mexico is one of 8 states that has addressed it by developing policy in the public education department. So at this point, I think New Mexico is in an advantageous position to make certain that there is a great deal of discussion, such as is going on here, in the development of that policy, so that it is not just a knee-jerk reaction of, let's get tougher laws. Part of the problem with passing a law and developing a law is in a cogent, understandable definition. And it's extremely hard to define.
Chris, I would like to start with you. Could you give us an overview of what laws are on the books now?
There's a couple of things. We have what's called a rule, Public Education Department rule, that has been on the books for a while, that requires school districts to have policies in place and to begin to look at programs and to implement programs. A law was passed for school districts, and basically what it said is that school districts must implement programs beginning next fall. So right now we're asking districts to submit to us what programs they're going to be implementing in the fall, and it may be multiple programs because it could be different by grade level, it could be different, it could be a district-wide program, or it might be we're doing this in our elementary schools, we're doing this in our middle schools, etc. And that also goes for all charter schools. Their policy has to address how they're going to address bullying, how bullying is reported to them, basically having a no fault if a student reports things, they can't be punished for reporting bullying to an authority. That's all in the district policies.
How loose is the framework? How much can schools kind of create their own programs? How much do they have to follow?
In terms of policy, we actually said these components must be in your policy. How they put them in there and exactly what it looks like is a local decision. In terms of program, they can choose whatever they want. We highly suggest they look at evidence-based programs. So we gave them a list of possible programs that they might be looking at. A lot of school districts are already doing something. Rio Rancho is a good example that they've been doing positive behavioral supports for many years, which is a whole environmental change.
What are the penalties if schools don't follow this rule or implement these guidelines?
The rule or statute did not identify any specific penalty if you don't follow it. The accountability falls with all accountability with schools. They have to follow all the rules and all the statutes. The accountability falls with the community. Whenever we get a call from a parent, for example, we encourage them to get a copy of the policy and see if the school district is actually following the policy that's in place.
You mentioned Rio Rancho Public Schools. Tana, can I ask you about the program you have in place? You call it the Positive Behavioral Support?
Positive behavioral support is really not a program, it's a framework. So every school is going to look different as to how they decide positive behavioral support is going to look on their campus. So as we talk about programs, such as bringing in Rachel's Challenge, which is a national program which you bring in to students to, it's talking about acts of kindness and how we treat each other, or bringing in Love and Logic, or Second Step program, or Nurtured Heart. I mean, there's all sorts of different programs.
How do you choose which ones you're going to bring in? These are a lot of different...
There's a lot of different ones, and I think that's one of the larger issues that districts deal with, is there's so much information out there, and every day I must get 5 to 10 emails on bullying, and here's a program, and it's great, and it does wonderful things.
Quite an industry.
But there's really no silver bullet. I mean, that's what PBS is, if you're doing it 100% fidelity, is about changing the environment on your campus and treating each other with respect and having acts of kindness and being mentors on your campus and working as a community, working with parents. And that is always a work in progress. I don't think you'll go to any campus that's perfect. I think that's something you have to strive to get to that place. And so positive behavioral support gives you that framework to be able to look at your parents, your community around your school, look at your students and your teachers and what will work for your campus.
There is no dedicated funding. I think what we envision is there should be some type of school-wide type of thing that happens that's an environmental change. There should also be some educational things that are happening in the classroom. Bullying is not a school problem. It happens on school campuses. It also happens off school campuses. And so if we want to stop bullying from occurring, then the community has to be part of the solution too.
I know up in Oregon they're having lots of issues with buses because the bus drivers can't get up from the middle of driving and go handle something that's happening in the back. They just have to keep driving and going with what's going on, and then it escalates to off the bus. So how does the policy handle on that?
Part of the requirement in the policy is to address on campus, on buses, at bus stops, school-sponsored events, and any school activity that occurs on a school campus. Buses are a good example because across the state, some buses belong to the school, and they have a lot more control when the district actually owns the bus, pays the bus driver. A lot of our bus services are contractual, and so it becomes a whole different thing. So they have to include in their contracts, do those bus drivers have to go through the same training? Because they're not a school employee, they're a contracted employee of the school.
What I propose is that a bus driver should have some sort of route or some sort of way to talk to teachers and say, okay, this kid, and this kid was doing something. Just because, you know, it's difficult to do something doesn't mean we shouldn't do it at all.
Bus drivers should be reporting incidents to the principal.
Do you have an avenue of which they can do that? Because they can't get off and
What about Rio Rancho? Do you guys if I could just interject, Rio Rancho Public Schools, we did just take over our own busing services, and so our bus drivers are our employees. And our Executive Director of Transportation has done a tremendous job at training all of our bus drivers. He actually supported PBS, and we trained all of the bus drivers on PBS, and they have a very good relationship, and they're our employees, so there are certain things that we can require of them and say, these are the things that you need to follow to make sure our students are safe, or maybe this might not be the job for you.
Brooke, can you talk a little bit about APS?
All of ours are contracted as well.
Is there a mechanism for bus drivers to report incidents?
I don't know, actually, at a school level. I'm not sure how they handle it. We have PBS in 25 of our schools, and so I know in some of there, when we look at the data, we get reports that say that something happened on a bus. So I think schools have some individual mechanisms for how they're reporting, but it is much more difficult to be able to. I know we have an excellent transportation director, and he's worked in a lot of other ways to create safe space on our buses, so I think that's a place that we probably can do more work.
Another avenue that we have is through Bernalillo County Parks and Recreation. We do bring over kids from the schools to our community centers, and so what we have done is worked with APS so that our policies mirror each other. So while you're in the transportation process, regardless if you're at school or you're at a community center, it's the same definition, the same verbiage, so it also helps. But the biggest thing that helps us the most is that our community center folks are talking with the principals at the school. They're building these relationships, and that's the most important part about preventing bullying, is that you have the relationships among the adults to where they're communicating. You could talk to a lot of our center managers, and they exchange emails with principals or teachers on a daily basis to say, Johnny's not doing so great, or he had an incident in the cafeteria, and it may explode when they get to the centers.
One thing that I want to bring up now that we have some leadership in here is the schools can't fix this problem. The schools are obviously the scapegoats because this is mostly where it happens, is at school. But we need to educate our parents how to talk to our kids. We need to educate kids how to talk to their parents. We need to educate the community how to stand up as a group and stand up for each other. Because part of what happens is when you're bullied, you feel like you're all alone on an island. And if you knew that there was people out there that could help you, it would probably prevent a lot of people from going through what I've gone through. So it's very important for me to let parents know that they can't just tell their kids anymore, you need to face your fears, you need to stand up for yourself, you need to learn to get along with other people, because it just doesn't work anymore. Parents need to understand that when they're doing that, they're becoming another bully. And then the kids are afraid to talk to anybody about it. I was suspended from school for being a victim. That's something that we absolutely have to change in this state.
Well, zero tolerance is not a requirement at all. If there's zero tolerance, it's actually at the local level.
But actually, you said that there's an element is you don't get
you don't get punished for reporting it.
If there's two people that are in a fight in a school, they're both suspended for 3 days. I'm part of an organization. I'm starting a chapter up in Los Alamos called Stand for the Silent. This organization was started by Kirk Smalley. His 11-year-old son shot himself because he was suspended from school. And we just can't do that anymore.
Robert, can I ask you at RFK, what do you do in situations like this? Do you suspend both kids, or do you?
So for us, there's a behavior interrupt. It's not a suspension, but both students would go home so we could collect the information. And then that next day, we bring the parent in with the student to figure it out. So if both students were involved in the fight, then the suspension applies. If one person's the aggressor and the other person's the victim, then it's different. But we look at it from a more restorative place. The person who's being the bully needs to learn, right? If we throw him out of school and he's incarcerated, he's not going to learn anti-bullying techniques incarcerated. And he's going to be a worse bully when he comes out. So there's a suspension. If you fight at our school, you're out for 9 weeks. You have to do 6 sessions with the social workers doing violence prevention work before you come back. You come back to the staff, present an essay about why we should reinstate you, and it's not going to happen again. So the student who really wants to be a thug isn't going to go through that violence intervention, right? The student who doesn't do it again. They get it, right? I agree with you. It's a community issue. So 3 weeks ago, our community had a tragedy. There were 2 RFK students walking home, and 2 of the students were murdered. It looks like they were young people doing the murdering. And so it's just tragedy across the board. So it's important we get this right. I don't know if they were bullied and became bullies. I don't know if they were simply victims. But it's a tragedy. Those parents are suffering.
Again, I just would love to hear more conversation about what are we doing as a community, because it is a community issue. It's serious mental health issues that have youth capable of something to that extreme or on the continuum less. And we really need to look at that, the abuses and the neglects that are the cause of that, and the stressors, and what's being provided to address the cause.
You pretty much lose your frontal lobe when you go through what I went through. You have no empathy. You have no sympathy, no empathy, no love, no hate, you have nothing. So, and that's what happens to these kids, in my opinion. They get involved in school shootings. Is they go through so much mentally that they just completely, their brains just shut down. And then your animal instincts kick in and you go take out your aggression on the people that caused all your pain.
And neuropsychology and science would absolutely validate that in terms of what you would experience as the victim, but many of the bullies, if not all of them, are sort of experiencing the same thing because of what they've experienced very often, what they're bringing to the school. They also lack the capacity for empathy, and that's what has them capable of doing it. And that's what we need to look at as a culture.
Representative Miera, you've just been presented with a very complex problem. Is there something legislatively that should take place at any of these levels to address this?
You cannot legislate good behavior. I mean, that's, you'd like to be able to say, okay, we're going to pass a law, and then everybody says, good, I'm going to obey the law now, and I'm just going to do what the law says. We have plenty of laws in the books. Most of them just aren't even followed through to their fullest extent. That being said, when you do have a piece of legislation, you have to make sure that it encompasses everybody that's going to be involved. And I think the bill that we have that passed took into consideration all of the necessities for having it broad for a variety of issues.
Is she implementing what was passed? Okay.
Yeah, the bill that she was making reference to, Senate Bill 98, a few years back on that one. This last legislative session, we introduced and passed a memorial that went into consideration doing exactly what you're talking about here. What the bill said is you've got to bring in the community and you've got to bring in parents. You just can't give it to the school. And can you do that legislatively? We can help. We can help by providing the resources that it comes to doing that. And when people ask for something very specific, then we can give them what they need. But to just say, well, you go out and do it and good luck, that's unfair to the community.
Can I ask the parents who are here, what would you like to see happen? What would you like to see different after you've gone through this with your kids?
They make elementary students sign contracts that they don't understand, and they mediate without parents' knowledge. And how can you hold a 4th grader to a contract?
What kind of contracts?
Contracts to not have any contact with each other. So I sat down and explained to my daughter what this was. The other little girl who signed the contract didn't adhere to the contract, and both girls were going to get suspended if they had contact. So my daughter's calling me from school having an anxiety attack because the other little girl is following her around and won't leave her alone. So she thinks she's going to get suspended, but it's not taken seriously by the other little girl. So bring all the parents in, make the parents sign the contracts, the older kids sign the contracts, the older ones that understand it, hold parents accountable.
That is exactly what needs to be done with bullying. What we do with school truancy is we meet with the students, and then if it's clear that the parents aren't coming to the meetings, adhering to these, trying to help their kids get to school, then the parents are held liable, and they can be taken to magistrate court and answer to the magistrate judge about what's going on.
So you think that should be used for bullying
Absolutely.
purposes?
I think the parents absolutely need to be held accountable for their child's actions.
We need to distinguish the difference between conflict and bullying. And there's a big difference. And so when you're dealing with bullying incidents, the way that you deal with it is if it's a bullying incident, you talk to the parties separately. Mediation is not appropriate. And you're able to get both sides of the story. And I think as in our policies, we have to be able to recognize the difference. But the most important part of that is that teachers and administrators and folks that are in the school need to understand the difference. And the only way that's going to happen is with training. And with most things that schools have to deal with now, testing, and different times that they get less training days because it's not paid time, and you have to have either the unions agree, you also have to have substitutes if teachers are going to be out of the classroom, and it's something that the legislature is going to have to help to fund.
And what do they need? They need money.
They need money to fund those salaries, to fund that training day, so that you could have a succinct training day and everybody can understand the difference between conflict and bullying, the proper responses to deal with a bullying incident. Because if you only have your school resource officers or only your counselors that are trained, not everybody in that school is on the same page. And the last thing I think is most important is that we need to train our adults to not just be adults and parents, but to become trusted adults. It's a big difference to be a parent versus to be a trusted adult.
How do you make that happen?
You have to have a communication and you have to have a relationship with the child. And you have to also prove to a child that you're trustworthy. And so some things you can do is when a child comes to you and says, "This happened to me," you sit there and you talk about it. And then you ask the child, "What can I do to make this situation better for you?" You don't do the adult thing and call the teacher right away and call the principal. You make sure that the child is comfortable with your reaction and they feel like they're a part of the reaction. And so they feel that you're the trusted adult.
And I totally agree with you. Except, I can't help but say this because I am a mental health provider, that's a healthy parent that is able to do that. And we have more and more parents who are drug addicted, victims of domestic violence, lack of their own relational skills that they're able to help their child develop. And so we do need to look at also preventative programs for working with children at a very young age, because children's neural pathways are developed by early childhood for the capacity for empathy. And if they're living in environments that have the stressors like violence and abuse and chaos, etc., that then we don't have children or we don't have parents who have the ability to do what she was describing.
Most of my friends, their parents work 2 or 3 jobs, so it's very difficult for parents to deal with that, just providing basic needs and thinking about, is my child safe at school?
It's my understanding there's federal funding available to help institute bullying programs. Can we get some of that? Get some of that federal funding, start working on this, get a pilot school, see how it goes. And if we have a pilot school and it works, Get APS on board. They're the biggest school in the district. We can get APS on board. We can get Rio Rancho on board. We can get Santa Fe on board. Why can't we get some of this money and see what we can do with it?
Schools have lost a significant amount of money over the last 3 years because of the recession and everything else. We have cut monies. We have cut those programs. Title IV is already out the door. I mean, those are the kind of programs that we have to bring back. But there has to be a groundswell of people saying, we want that money to come back. We want those programs to come back because it does indeed affect every one of the children that are in there. Whether or not I'm part of it, it's going to significantly impact my child in one form or another.
So do you need to hear not just from people like Tana and Brooke, but parents and students?
Exactly.
Who are working together.
Everybody in here can agree that the program that he's running at Sandia High School is working.
With, how much money do you have for that?
We spent about $10.
Okay.
It costs
big money.
It costs $0 to really, really put a dent in this bullying problem. If a school can put up a poster, if we can get one teacher to volunteer maybe an hour of their time to sponsor these kids, or a parent that is concerned about it to sponsor these kids, to have a program like they're running at Sandia High School, it will put such a huge dent, I promise you, from my experiences. If I had peers that I knew about that went through the same thing I did, and people that would step in, we'd probably knock out at least 50% of the problem in a week.
I hate to cut a conversation short, but we have to wrap up, and I hope you all will continue this conversation in the community and that our viewers understand that this involves all of us. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
The more people understand the severity of this problem and where it leads, that we're going to be able to address it better.
I feel like this is a great beginning. I am leaving here hopeful. I feel like we have much more work to do, though.
Every day, children are dying from this. And when these kids feel alone and don't feel like they're a part of something or that they're somebody, they don't see any other way out but taking their own life. So it's very important that we get the message out, not only to parents that this is occurring, but also to the kids to let them know they're not alone.
It's really nice to be able to have a dialogue where we really feel like parents want to be partners, because sometimes it seems that we're in an adversarial relationship, which we never want that. We always want to feel like we're really partnering with our community members and our parents so we can develop healthy environments for all of our kids.
I think the main piece that I take away is that we're all in this together, and that there are people here that I have not been able to meet in person, and really appreciating to build those relationships now so that we can continue this work. So I'm hopeful that we can come up with solutions together, including new forms of funding, to be able to support our public school systems, to be able to give trainings on bullying prevention, or creating a new caring culture and environment in our schools.
This is not about violence. This is about empowering kids to stand up and say, you know what, this isn't right. This isn't right to treat people this way. We don't want this in our community. We don't want hate in our community anymore. We just want everybody to respect each other in our community.
There's lots of hope, and it's through you and me and everybody just to make a really big difference.
Join us for Public Square on the last Thursday of every month. To participate in Public Square and for more information, go to our website, www.newmexicopbs.org, and click on Local Productions. Here you can give us feedback or suggest topics. Also, look for us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching.